Hello.
Oh, hey, hey,
How are you? How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain.
It's so nice to meet you.
I know 30-year-old me is like geeking out and like freaking out right now.
I just have to say, I am so surprised and also super grateful that you started that page. It's been really fun and interesting, especially like so far from what was that, year 2000?
Yeah,
Um,
2000,
to
2001, yeah.
2001, um, to just like see all of the video again. I had been looking and only found a few things on YouTube. I don't even know where my VHS tapes are anymore. So I'm just so grateful that you started this. I have to ask, did you just one day you just decided I'm going to go back and look and see if I can find everything?
So when the whole pandemic happened and the quarantine happened, everyone just seemed to be going back to old TV shows, stuff that they remembered. And I've always been a fan of anything pop music and anything girl groups. Like that's like my thing. So I was like, you know what? I was like, I know I have my VHSs somewhere. I was like, let me look for them. I looked for them, I found them, and then I was like, okay, now let me try to convert them and put them like digitally just for my pleasure, to be honest, like to view them. But then I was thinking, I was like, you know what? I was like, I kind of want to make, because I've done like little fan pages before and stuff like that. I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? I was like, let me do one for pop stars because it was one of my favorite shows growing up. I love like reality TV. I love competition. I love music.
Mhm.
So I was like, let me do it. And I just did it on a whim. And then it was so surprising for me to hear from like you and the other contestants, like them messaging me saying like, oh my God, like, thank you for these memories. And then
It's
like
so
also
great.
like the fans are still around. People still love Eden's Crush, still love the show, still after all this time. So it's been amazing. Like you were saying, like for your memories, but for me, just to be able like right now interact with you, I was like, oh my God, I saw her on TV. Like she's one of my favorites.
It's so great. And you know, I think I had mentioned this before in one of our messages that back then, you know, we didn't really have social media. We didn't have, I don't even think YouTube was available at the time. I think the only thing that was really available, I honestly, I don't even think we had anything like that. And so sometimes I wonder, it was hard because we didn't really know once the show aired. Obviously, we already knew sort of what was happening. And once the show had wrapped, then, you know, it had to go into editing and the whole thing. So we couldn't share anything with anybody about who made it, who didn't make it, what happened, until the show had aired and was done. And then we were sort of free to do interviews or whatever we wanted to do. But it was so hard to tell who was watching, if anybody was interested. You know, obviously, we had like family and friends who would contact us and say, like, oh my God, this is so cool. You know, did you make it? Did you make it? Did you make it? But it wasn't at back then we didn't have followers, right? Like we didn't know how to sort of track who was voting for who and who, you know, really sort of like had the fan base. So it was one of those things that like I sometimes wonder what it would be like if we had done the show now.
Yeah.
How different it would be in terms of like all of our career trajectories and, you know, with social media and YouTube and everything. I'm just like I'm so grateful that you did this. I'm so happy to be doing this with you.
Well, thank you, thank you. Okay, so I wanted to start off. So before you did Pop Stars, were you into music, theater, or like why Pop Stars? Why did you
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. And I think that's one thing that none of us really got to showcase in the show was like our careers or what we were doing before. I actually grew up in LA and grew up in the entertainment industry. So from the time I was about 6 or 7, I was in a performing arts school, had an agent, was doing, you know, commercials, some Disney stuff. and sort of grew up in that industry. And so by the time I'd filmed Pop Stars, I was about 20 or 21. So I'd had more than enough like time and exposure and familiarity with the industry. And was sort of like going back and forth in and out. I had, the year before I danced on Soul Train, for 2 years. I was a Soul Train dancer, one of the main sort of dancers on the stage, and was like sort of in and out of the industry, you know, like I would go back to school and take some classes in college, and then I would get an audition or a call, and then I would, you know, go for that, and then take some time off when I would get a job. So I'd been in the industry for a really long time before that, which is like, I think, you know, it's funny because when I rewatch the episodes, I can see sort of like my cynicism, like my sarcasm about the industry. You know, when there's that clip where I talk about, you know, if you see me down in the street walking, which by the way,
you did not. Oh my God, the iconic boots.
These are them, and I will do my whole little thing that I did. Yes, these are them. I still have them. I don't even remember the last time I wore them, but these are the guys that I wore for the show. But yeah, I don't know if you can remember the clip where I talk about, you know, if you saw me walking down the street with shoes like that, and the outfit I was wearing, you would call me a freak. But if I'm a pop star, it's cool, right? And that was sort of like, in looking back, I noticed like, you know, being in that industry for so long, you just learn so much about the ins and outs and like the things that you don't actually really see, you know, on tours and shows and that sort of thing. So I think that was a little bit of like my cynicism of like, everything that you see on TV is kind of like considered cool, but if it's in real life, you sort of question somebody's sanity. Yeah. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's my background. I grew up in the entertainment world, you know, entertainment, performing arts schools and that sort of thing.
Okay. And then how did you hear about Pop Stars then?
Yeah, so ironically, I was working with a manager at the time, who was sort of, I had done some singing, and like back then, it's so funny that I say back then because it doesn't feel that long, but it does
not. But then when you add up the years, it's like, oh, it's been a
back then when you were either trying to get a deal, or especially with the vocal stuff, you actually like did a private meeting, or you showed up at a studio where you knew somebody was going to be, and you sang like right there on the spot in front of them. You know, nowadays, like we can record tapes, we can do Zoom, like there's a lot of other different sort of options, but back then it was like everything was in person. So I had been working with a manager who had done a couple of like connections with me. I'd sung for Montel Jordan, you know, a few other people in the industry. And so she called me and said, hey, there is and she'd been working with an A&R guy who was working for David Foster's sort of label that he had created. And they notified her and told her about the auditions. And I said, all right, you know, and I kind of, growing up in that industry, you just learn to sort of like throw yourself into stuff, right? You don't really think too much about it because you really never know. And so I said, okay, let's do it. So we did it. It was probably one of the biggest auditions I'd ever been to in terms of the amount of girls that had showed up. And so she sort of was the one who contacted me and told me about it, and I just showed up.
Okay, so then the audition process, the first audition, how did that go, or how did you? Yeah,
so again, this was a long time ago, so there's things about it that like are kind of fuzzy. And I think also a little bit, I was sort of like overwhelmed with the like huge process of it all. I from what I remember, it was at a hotel here in LA. And you just sort of, you had a call time, you waited, they gave you a number. You sat in this big giant conference room. I think you all could see that in the show. And then when it was your time, you went in and you did your thing, and they had a list of songs that you could choose to sing from. Obviously it was on national TV, so they had to get licensing and permission and everything for us to be able to use those songs. And you went in with a group of girls, and one person, one by one, did their thing. At first it was more about kind of like your presence and the voice, your voice. And some of the other stuff sort of came after, as you can see in the episodes.
So then for callbacks and the dance scene, how was that process? How did you, because was this like literally like the next day, or was it a few days after, or?
Yeah. Great questions. Yeah. And it's hard to tell because in the show, it seems like it could have been a longer period of time than it actually was. And from what I remember, it was one day of auditions, and then they told you right there, okay, we want to see you again. So it was the next day that we would have the callback. And then it was, a little bit more of like talking, getting to know you, also again singing. And then I believe it was the next round later that was the dancing. And that's when you could actually really tell, for all of us, who was like really, really sort of classically trained in dance, who was just sort of like, a dancer, but nothing like very trained. And then that's when you could sort of see where people stood in terms of talent and skill, based on, voice, presence, obviously, and dance.
Okay. And then, so then after that, you guys waited for the call to invite the 26 girls to the LA workshop, which the workshop episodes were probably my favorite. I mean, I enjoyed the whole show, like we said earlier, but just because, like you said, it narrowed it down to the actual girls that had talent. And then you got to see a little bit more of each girl. We still didn't see, some of the girls didn't really get featured. And so that was always like, how, like, as a viewer, it's like, how did these people make it when you guys never even showed them on the show?
Yeah.
So I never liked that part, because I was just like, The workshop. So what could you share about the workshop?
Yeah. So, I think you, like everyone else watching it, was also just as interesting as those of us who were actually in the show. Was interesting because, they were filming, and this is what trips me out all the time, is that this is pretty much like one of the first sort of making of the band, real world-ish type of things, where they were filming like the whole time, right? When you're doing commercials or movies, right? Like, the director says cut and like cameras go off, right? But during this time, they were just filming all the time. And so in watching it, there were definitely times where I was like, oh, we all had like more than enough camera time that they didn't show. And sometimes I felt like they would, obviously for like television, sort of allude to something because they'd already known how things were going to pan out. So sort of spending a little bit more time on girls that they thought maybe the audience would be more interested in versus girls who'd actually made the show. They already knew, so they wanted to like sort of give their storyline. And that was that was one of the hardest and also like frustrating parts, was because there was lots of really fun and cool stuff that we all did together, and conversations we had, and like little group powwows that we would do in between like some of the dancing and the singing that never really got covered. And so, you know, I wonder what ended up on the cutting room floor in terms of like girls and camera time and things that we'd all sort of experienced together. The other interesting thing is that I don't remember if they showed this, but when the show wrapped, they actually decided that they might want to make some changes. And so they contacted me, among other girls, to come back and do another sort of audition that they taped. And so this must have been maybe about a month after everything had wrapped, maybe 3-4 weeks, somewhere around there. And they had us show up at a studio here in LA, and like a full, you know, fully stocked studio with engineer and the recording studio and everything. Yeah.
When you said it had a wrap, you mean like the workshop had a wrap, or the whole
the whole show had wrapped?
Okay.
And they were planning on, I'm not sure what happened, and if they kind of wanted to do like another episode of asking some girls to come back. But that's what happened. So they contacted my manager and said, oh, we want to see Garland again. And so I showed up at a studio there, and we did, you know, like the whole like singing vocal stuff. I don't remember if they showed that in the
and that's news to me.
Yeah, and that's actually how I think they found Miley. Okay. And she wasn't a part of the audition process.
Yes.
Yeah. And so yeah, that's something that they didn't. And so those are all the things that like happened behind the scenes.
Yeah, that like, in the show, what they did is they said they had the 10 finalists, and then they said that 2 of the girls ended up dropping out, which they wanted to hold more auditions, which is when, like you said, they had Miley. So then you and a few other girls then came back and did that as well.
Yeah, I don't know who else of like the original group of girls who actually went through the whole audition process came back. Because from what I remember, I was like the only one in the studio at that time. And so, you know, I don't know if they were doing like individual auditions. I'm not sure exactly how they found Miley. I don't know if she'd had a manager or if, you know, she was maybe somebody who'd gotten cut in another city. So yeah, that was one of the things, you know, it's like, you want so badly to be like, oh, but what about this and this happened?
And they didn't even show it.
Yeah. And that's what I mean is that tape is probably long gone by now, but I would just love to see like all the stuff that didn't make it, you know?
I get you on that. How was it though working with David Foster, Roger Love, Travis, James, and Jennifer though?
Yeah. It's funny because after the show wrapped, I had gotten contacted by, do you remember Kathy Griffin?
Yes.
Yeah. So Kathy Griffin had a talk show at the time. And I'd been contacted by her people and actually did the Kathy Griffin show. I don't even know where that footage is. And she asked me a lot like, oh, how was it, you know, working with David Foster? And I think she was sort of implying like that he might have been like an elusive sort of character. Mm-hmm. But I think in hindsight, like during that time, you realize that these people are instrumental in the entertainment world, but you're so sort of like focused on the moment that you don't, if you think too much about like who's standing in front of you, it takes you out of where you should be, right? Mentally, in terms of like, because, you know, it's a competition and you're aware of that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? Because we when we filmed the workshop, we were actually all staying in the same hotel here in the Valley. And so, you know, we were aware all the time that like this was, you know, a big competition. And so when you're in front of these people, you know, like, wow, this is cool. This is a big deal. But you're also sort of like trying to stay focused in like you're doing what you're there for. Still to this day, sometimes now in hindsight, realizing like the huge impact that David Foster had in the entertainment world. You know, other people will be like, oh my God, I can't believe you sang with him and you went to the studio and this, that, whatever. And now I realize like, wow, that was literally like a once in a lifetime, you know, opportunity to be able to do that. And Travis was great, such a great guy. You know, everybody on the show was really great. Jennifer, I think is her name. I think she was one of the managers. She was a judge. You could see in her face, like when they would cut people, like it was like very, it was very painful. You know, cause they got to know us and they saw us every day. For about, I think it was about a week that we were there at the workshop. So yeah, it was still to this day, I think I back then didn't realize the extent, but now I'm like, wow, that was really cool.
And then during the workshop, who do you say, I mean, because like you said, you guys spent 7 days together. Who do you feel you got close to? You were able to, you know?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because as the days went by, you could sort of see how the stress and like competition and pressure was difficult for some of us. Just in the sense that, you know, when you're a performer, you're performing because you just love what you do, right? You love the art, you love the music, you love being able to utilize your talent, right? And then as you realize that like, oh, I'm in a competition with other girls my age, and being in that industry in general can be really difficult if you don't have like a solid sense of like, you know, yourself. You're constantly comparing. Sometimes there was some disagreements here and there between girls and, you know, a lot of shit talking behind people's backs. A lot of like, oh, hi, you know, and then like later on, you're like, what's going on? And, you know, we were all anywhere between the ages of like 18 to 20, maybe 23. And so even then, you know, you have young girls just comparing themselves to each other. So I was actually really lucky and really fortunate to be rooming with Alexandra, who is just was and is still just the sweetest person. And you know, it was kind of nice because when we would come back to our room, we would like come back and be like, oh, this is like very stressful and very weird. You know, and like recognize having somebody to talk to about like what that competition is like, and being insecure about your body and your talent, and like not really knowing what the next day was going to bring or what to expect, and not being able to share anything with your family and friends, right? Because we had to sign these contracts that say like you cannot talk to anybody about this, or who made it, who got cut, anything. So it was really nice to have her to come back to and sort of like debrief and decompress and not have to be on, right? And so we had connected not too long after the show, but then completely had lost touch. And then once you started the page, a lot of us were able to get back in touch with each other. I also was really close for a while after the show with Katie, who, you know, sometimes I watch a show back and I'm like, wait, where's the footage of
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like we didn't really get to see her at all.
Yeah, and such a talented woman now, but girl, and you know, she did a lot of sort of like that ska like band type of music in Orange County. But she was close. She was in LA as well. So we would go out a lot after the show aired. There was a place on Sunset called Miyagi's back in the day after the show aired. And on Tuesdays, I think it was Tuesdays, they'd have industry night where like celebrities would come to hang out, and they had karaoke. And so, you know, and this was like during the time when like NSYNC was really popular. Jamie Foxx was always there. I mean, any Tuesday night, if you were part of the industry, you were probably hanging out with, you know, big time names at the time. So we would all get together and go there and do karaoke, and hang out. And so, yeah, Alexandra and Katie, I was pretty close with during the show and after. Some of the other girls were a little bit more to themselves, and not as friendly, not really interested in sort of like getting to know any of the other girls. So yeah, it was interesting. It was very like you had to sort of pick and choose who you felt you could connect with.
Yeah. So as far as to wrap up the workshop, your day that you got cut.
Mm-hmm.
I know for that particular scene, I think in like the previous cut, like when Alexandra got cut and the other girls got cut, they kind of like sat down with them and they talked to them a little bit. But when they cut you and the other girls on that particular scene, they really didn't talk. Like they didn't show you them talking to you guys. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what did they say that they? If you remember.
Yeah, I remember, and you know, you can kind of feel it coming, if that makes sense. You know, as people started getting cut, it was either maybe because, and during this whole time, we were all like hypothesizing about like what kind of group they were putting together, right? So like
there is a little scene there in the show where they talk about that. Yeah,
and we were all like, okay, you know, at that time I think Christina Aguilera was really big, and sort of like the Latina like look was starting to get really popular, and so we were trying to figure out, okay, are they trying to make like a girl pop band, or like a girl pop rock band, or like a girl pop like Latin look band? Like we were all like trying to figure it out, right? And as people started getting cut, we were like, okay, I think we know where we're going now, right? Yeah. And so when the day that I got cut, I had sort of kind of had a feeling, and I think I was like losing steam, in terms of like, you know, with the stress and the competition and the pressure, coupled with like my cynicism already having been in the industry for so long. You know, a lot of these girls had never been to LA. A lot of these girls who'd made it, you know, either started in the industry like later or were doing theater wherever they were. And so I could see the difference in like exposure to the actual real ins and outs of the industry. And so some of the other girls, I think, were a little sort of like doughy-eyed about everything than I was. I was super cynical. I was like, oh God, this is just like another machine, you know? And so when they cut me, I think you know, my reaction was kind of like, okay, you know, I get it. I see what's happening here. And I didn't really, I think I was disappointed. I don't think I wanted to show it too much.
Okay.
Like I think I was being a little bit more mental about it, like trying to figure out like, okay, these are the reasons why this is, you know what I mean? Like I was trying to like figure it out. But definitely after I got cut, like I went back to the hotel and I cried for like a few hours. Mainly because, you know, a lot of the girls were starting to leave and it was like you were just immersed in this world for weeks, right?
Yeah.
And sort of waiting to see what was going to happen. So, you know, the cuts and the thing is that the show moved so quickly that it was really hard to sort of get a storyline on one person completely. So, you know, I think they were trying to put the pieces together with also like making it make sense at the end.
Yes. Okay. So then, okay. Then I noticed, did the show ask you and some of the other girls to come back for the finale for the concert, or was that just the girls going to go supporting? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, where was it? It was somewhere in LA. Did they say the name of the place?
I don't remember right now.
It was like the Palladium. No, it was, you know, in LA, like a lot of these venues, they change names.
Yes.
So often. And so yeah, we all showed up. It was me, Katie, whoever was available in LA at the time. And so that was also to see the final product. We were like, oh, okay, now we get it. It's like a Latina sort of pop band, or like with that look, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was fun and interesting. And yeah, I think it was myself, Katie. I know Katie and I met there.
Margot, Chesa.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And then they show Shonda like in a different clip that she was there too.
Yeah. And that was a few months after the show had wrapped. And we had, you know, I had gone back and done that other audition. And so this was the first time we were actually really seeing the girls who made the band. And sort of like finding out who had made it.
Oh, okay. So then, did you ever consider auditioning for the second season? Because I know some of the girls did. Was that ever something, or that maybe you did it already once and you were like, I'm good?
Yeah. I, you know, not too long after the release of the show, I kind of just left the industry. I think that was sort of my last love-hate relationship with the industry.
I guess, yeah.
It was just kind of like, okay. And during that time, I think like manufactured bands were really like a thing.
Yeah.
And so to me, once it stopped being fun and became less about talent and more about how you could market somebody or something, and like I said, I was always like trying to figure things out, right? And like put the pieces together. So once I realized that it was not about talent anymore, it became less fun for me. And so I just sort of faded out of that industry, left, went back to school. I did try out for American Idol.
You did?
Uh-huh.
Season?
That audition was, I think it was the season, it must have been 2007, I don't remember. My son was very young. After I left the industry, I actually had a son and got married shortly after, like a year after. I was like, I need to try something different. um, yeah, that audition was, I mean, it was, I think it was at a stadium. That was like twice the size of.
Yeah, I mean, by that year, American Idol had a few seasons, so it was big.
It was, and you know, I didn't even realize Kelly Clarkson tried out for Pop Stars.
So see, I'm telling you, the show didn't really. I guess it picked and choose who they wanted to show on actual TV, but she did audition for Pop Stars. She has 2 tiny scenes, and it's like a reel where they're kind of saying like at the end of day 1, and they show her, and she has done an interview where she says that she auditioned for the show too, but I mean, I don't know about the footage, like you said, it's probably lost somewhere.
Yeah, I know. And when I think I saw on your page, on your Instagram page, that Kelly Clarkson had tried out, and I was like, she did? Wow, that's crazy. And I'm sure there's other girls who are still in the industry who have either, you know, gotten really far or are songwriters or producers. You know, a lot of us decided to go into other areas of the industry. And so I'm sure there's other girls who tried out who probably have footage somewhere. Because like I said, that was one of the first sort of mainstream shows like that.
So you talked about too that you left the industry, because I was gonna say life after, but like then, so right now, what is that you do right now?
Yeah, so you know, I sometimes think about going back and for fun and like not taking it so seriously, because you know, if you're actually like a real true performer, you'll always love the art. Yeah. It's just that it gets really murky when you're dealing with an industry. Like the industry is like a system, and there's lots of moving pieces and parts that can make you lose the love for the art. And so, you know, I have done some studio stuff in and out here and there, some live performances since then, but I only choose things for the art as opposed to the recognition, because I think that's where things start to get fucked up, right? Is like where you're doing it to make a name for yourself as opposed to doing it because you love it. And so, you know, I think about going back and doing things here and there, which, you know, maybe this will give me that little kick that I need. But I did go back and I finished my bachelor's, I got my master's degree. I'm finishing up my PhD, my doctorate. And I talk a lot about in my profession. So I'm a psychotherapist. And my PhD is in substance use disorder related research. And I talk a lot about my experiences in the entertainment industry and my own struggle with like figuring out who I really was, not like who I was playing or what people wanted me to be, right? And the role that substance use played in helping me get through some of the shitty things about that industry. You know, I know that Nikki also struggled, and, you know, rest in peace. She was also such a really like real person, right? Like wasn't trying to put on a show. And so that's what I've been doing for the last, I would say 10 years, is just sort of like, working in the mental health world, substance use, trying to really talk about, there's this thing called ACEs, which is called the adverse childhood experiences. And it's like this thing that it's a test that they give people to find out like how many adverse experiences they've had in their childhood. And that's very correlated to like substance use and mental health issues and just physical health issues. And I talk a lot about ACEs among child performers. Because, a lot of us who grew up in the industry had some adverse experiences, whether it was, sexual abuse, lots of stress and pressure on us to like be a certain way. And I think that's why a lot of us who grew up in the entertainment industry struggle with mental health and substance use, is because nobody really talks about more so now, but nobody really talks about those adverse experiences that a lot of us had, and what it feels like to just grow up under that much pressure.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a lot of pressure, a lot.
Yeah, and tons of comparison and tons of rejection. Right? Like you sometimes you have to go on 100 auditions to get one job for a 30-second clip, right? And so that's why I think people really doing it for the love and as opposed to the recognition helps people stay out of that nasty stuff that can happen.
Well, any other stories or anything that you want to share from either pop stars or your American Idol audition or anything at all?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. What I would love is if we could do like a group Zoom.
I thought of doing that too. First I wanted to reach out to like some girls and do it, but my initial thought was like to do like a big group thing, but I was like, to be able to get everybody like
at the same day at the same time. Yeah.
Still something. I mean, like I did reach out to a few other girls and they said yes. I reached out to Alexandra. Yeah. I reached out to Baby. I wanted to start out with a few though. I was like, let me knock these out and then keep reaching out to the other ones. So maybe after I could try to get.
I bet you that would be so, because there's things that they probably remember that like I just don't remember. And so it would be actually kind of like, how they do like a After the Rose Bachelor thing or whatever. It would be really cool to be able for whoever can make it to get together and just sort of like compare stories and like, do you remember when that happened? Because none of us have actually really gotten together to talk fully about our experience. So I would love that.
I'll work on it.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm more than happy to like reach out to whoever as well, to see if we can coordinate something like that. Because I just think it would be fun for everybody, for people who love the show, fun for us girls. Yeah. But I think, the one thing that I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that I wanted to share with you. I think, I'll share with you some like a couple of my favorite moments of the show.
Okay.
One of my favorite moments was the call that I had made it. I don't know if you remember, but there was like a room full of people there.
Yes, yeah, like your friends, right? Or family?
Yes, yeah. I was actually at my manager's house. And my manager then actually ended up doing her own show called Shaws of Sunset. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Okay, yes.
If you watch the show back, she's sitting next to me. Her name is Layla, and her sister's name is Golnessa, or she goes by Gigi, I think, on the Shaws of Sunset show. But I've known Layla and Gigi. We grew up together. So I've known them since I was like maybe 3 or 4, which is why I felt comfortable with her being my manager, because she knew me for so long. But that was one of my favorite memories. The cameras showed up and came and everything started rolling. And we waited for the call. So I had Layla there, a bunch of our other friends. My dad was there. I think he was the one holding the champagne
Oh yes, yes, I remember that.
That was actually one of the funnest times that I had on that show, was just sort of filming that and like the whole like waiting for the call.
Yeah.
I
know that they used that clip for season 2, like when they were saying boys and girls.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, so they had like, I guess like when they picked the Eden's Crush, they showed them like rehearsing, and they're like, but this time we're going co-ed, and they showed you and that whole scene as like opposed to like kind of like this would be a group with guys and girls. So they did use that for like their little promos.
I love it. Yeah, no, to be honest with you, I didn't watch the second season. And I think it's also because I was just sort of like,
yeah. Been there, I lived the real thing.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know, like if they did a better job of following the people in that show. But yeah, that filming that part was so fun for me. And I would have to say that the other fun parts, which you don't see very often, but I do think there's a clip, is that there, like a bunch of us girls used to get together in a circle, especially when there was some cattiness happening. We would all get together in a circle and go around and say nice things about each other. So, you're an amazing performer, or like you're such a wonderful person. You're a great mom, because some of the girls had already had kids at that time. And so those sort of times that they didn't show very often was, and I wish they would, because it would have been there would have been some interesting sort of drama that you could have followed in there. And then just like sort of after the workshop at the hotel, like we'd all get together and have dinner or breakfast or whatever. Those are some of my most favorite times, because we are all so different, right? And so like getting all of the different personalities together was really something that I had enjoyed.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
This has been so much fun. First of all, thank you again for taking your time out of your day to do this.
Of course.
As I mentioned in the beginning, 30-year-old me is like freaking out. I'm like, Garland from Pop Stars.
I'm so glad. And thank you for watching the show and being a fan, and pulling this together. And hopefully this will not be the last time that I see you, and we can maybe try to do like a group Zoom at some point.
I'll work on it. I'll try to work on magic and see what I could do.
Are you based in California?
Yes,
where are you?
I'm in California. I'm in the Inland Empire. I'm in Riverside.
Oh, the IE. Yes, I know. I know. Yeah, anytime you want to do something else or whatever, you have any ideas, I'm more than happy to do it.
Okay. Do you want to plug in your social medias, or are you good?
Oh yeah, sure. So everything is Garland Gerber. I have my Instagram is at Garland Gerber. I have a website, garlandgerber.com, which is all really pretty much like my therapy and substance use stuff. If anybody's ever interested and has questions about that, I am more than happy. I do a lot of like podcasts and stuff that talk about my experience in the entertainment industry and the struggle with substance use and mental health and body image and all of those things, which I think, for me, not only having experiences like Pop Stars, but like being very real and talking about like the sides that we don't get to see, because it's not all glitter boots and TV shows and all these things. A lot of it, what we struggle with, I think that I am more than happy to share with people about those things, because I think more of us struggle with those things than we talk about.
Yeah.
And so, that's what a lot of my social media is. My Twitter is Garland Gerber as well. Anything Garland Gerber, you'll probably find me, because I don't think there's another Garland Gerber in the world. And people always ask me, they're like, is that your real, like, that's your real name? Stage name? No, that's my real name. So yeah, everything's Garland Gerber. And yeah, I will keep you updated if I decide to, do any other entertainment stuff.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for doing this.
Of course, anytime.
All right, you have a good day.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.
Bye.